your account.
Jayadev, please, you want to say something?
This is coming up for me, and it doesn't have to be answered now, but I figured just because I'm remembering it, I'll put it out in the ether and maybe we can remember it. I was trying to find the connection with the peacock because it's so ubiquitous in all of everything. We have peacock feathers everywhere too. And I was looking at them out the window and they were on the altar and in Jagannath's crown. And I was just wondering, I hadn't really heard anything. I mean, it's just, I just accept it's always a part of Krishna's accoutrement, but I never have heard anything specific about it. It's just always there, peacocks and peacock feathers. So I was wondering if there was anything Srila Gurudeva or Guru Maharaj had said, or anything from the Shastra, any kind of connection or anything about it.
I see that Narottam has raised his hand. Do you have something to say about that, Prabhu?
Yeah, I've heard in a class from another Maharaj that the peacocks had, I forget, it's something in Goloka. There was a pastime with Krishna. They had offered themselves to Krishna in some way or form or another, that Krishna then places the peacock in his hat. It's I guess it could be a similar analogy with the bamboo flute, but I don't remember exactly the story, but that's where I'm kind of headed to, that in Goloka, the peacocks had offered something like that to Krishna, and then Krishna wore the peacock feather in his hat as a because it was an offering to him. It's it's pastime that happens in Goloka.
This is recorded in somewhere in the scriptures. You're saying. I would think somewhere like Garga Samhita may have something about that. Yeah, I mean, there no doubt there is a deep science, there's deep reasoning behind all of these things, but I'm not familiar with that. I haven't heard anything about that. In a simple sense, I can simply say that peacocks are beautiful, charming. Marie has some interesting comments here in regards to Christian theology, which you may want to have a look at. But no, I haven't heard anything in particular. For me, simply, yesterday or the day before in Ireland, someone was asking me about I like the last comment of Marie. They're beautiful and they dance. That's what gets me. That's what gets me. And
I heard something else too. I heard that it's also the absolutely heartfelt cry. If anybody of you heard them cry, they have a very loud, very unusual bird sound they make. They cry for the Lord. So their cry is so deep and heartfelt. They cry for the Lord. Yeah, and when I travel to like Mathura and Vrindavan, it's just like they're everywhere. They're also just, their presence is just physically massively right there where Krishna's places. They just sit on all the walls everywhere and walk around.
Well, that's beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Gangalila. But I was just going to say, when I was in Ireland just the other day, someone was asking me about the significance of the flute, and I said, I share different thoughts which I'd heard from our gurus, but for me, essentially, thank you. For me, essentially, I see the flute as something that is beautiful and charming and represents Krishna's playful nature, right? Krishna is known as Leela Purushottam or Leela Moy. He is characterized by his playful nature and his loving nature over and above anything else. And so, we had some discussion, like making a contrast with other, we see other deities, they're carrying a bow and arrow or a club or a chakra or, and trident and so on and so forth. But Krishna, a flute, and he likes to be surrounded by peacocks, the cows, his mood is gentle, playful, loving, charming, and so I feel the peacocks there they're also very elegant creatures, aren't they? I mean, I'm just speaking from an aesthetic point of view, which is a part of it, no doubt. They're very elegant creatures, very refined creatures. So I feel they fit in with Krishna's style, Krishna's persona. They fit in with all of that. That's all I can say. But no doubt there is much more to be said, and we have heard some interesting comments from some of the others in our group.
Yeah, because I've heard extensive commentary on the flute and other aspects of his presentation or his Leela, but I haven't heard anything about the peacock, at least from sources that I trust. I keep my sources a little limited, sure. I'm not hearing from all kinds of different swamis. I'm sure there are plenty that are giving some commentary, but in our line specifically, I haven't heard much mention even. Yeah. There is something about that blue though, right at the center of the eye. My God,
Yes, I was thinking about that too, that the coloring of the peacock feathers, it's so extraordinary. Yeah. There are a few birds that we hear about a lot in connection with Krishna, particularly the peacock, and then also the kokil. We hear about the kokil bird, which I don't think exactly has an equivalent in Western countries, but is a type of cuckoo and has an extraordinary call. When you hear that call, it's like it just strikes to your heart. It's very beautiful, very touching, very heart-rending. That we hear about the kokil often in Vaishnava literature and poetry, especially. It's a symbol of love, of amorous love, Madhura Rasa, especially during the mating season. That's when these birds, they call, and very extraordinary sound. And then also we hear about the chakora birds, which live on moonlight, and also the chatak birds, which live on rainwater. And we could go into a whole discussion actually about these different birds and different poetic comments. And our Gurudev, he was so deeply, when you first asked that question, I was immediately thinking, oh, how would Gurudev answer that? Because our Gurudev, he was so deeply knowledgeable in all these things. He was very hidden actually in that sense, because he kept a lot of it like within, but like as an example, Bhakti Dalita, one of our Guru's personal secretaries, she told me that on one occasion when he was visiting Russia, there was a circus, like a special circus that was arranged for him by Avadut Maharaj. He always makes these extraordinary arrangements. So he had these circus performers come and put in, and then our Gurudev met with some of these performers, and they were elephants. They were elephant trainers. That was their particular specialty. And Lalita said that our Gurudev, he spoke for an hour about the significance of elephants in the scripture, like quoting so many Sanskrit verses and speaking about the significance of elephants. Like he had such a deep wealth of knowledge, on every topic, on everything. So no doubt he would have much to say, in response to that. But unfortunately, we are not even close. Anyway, but something to look out for. Okay, well, anything else? And welcome to Dustin, who's also just joined us.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Dustin. Where are you tuning in from?
Currently Seabrook, Texas. Just arrived.
Okay, awesome. Welcome to our family here. Okay, so we're going to continue. We are on chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita. And I'll begin from verse 20 here. And for those of you who have the text in front of you, we can all chant together. So we'll chant a few verses and then we can look at the translations. And I think we are coming to we're coming to the end of the chapter. So, okay, so picking up from verse 20. Excuse me. Na prahishyat priyam prapya, no dvijat prapya cha priyam, stira buddhira samuddo, brahmavid brahmani stitaha, Payasparshe swashaktatma, vindatyatmani yatsukam, sa brahma yoga yuktatma, sukamakshayam ashnute, yehi samsparsha jaboga, dukayonaya evate, adnyantavanta konteya, nateshu ramate buddhaha. Shaknoti haivaya shodham praksharira vimokshanat kama krododbhavam vedam sayukta sasuki naraha yanta sukantaramas tatantar jyoti eva yaha sayogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhuta digachati labante brahma nirvanam Rishaya kshina kalmashaha chinna dvaidaya tatmanaha sarvabhuta hiterataha. Okay, I'll pause there and we can look at the translations. Absorbed in transcendence, endowed with steady intelligence, and free from the delusion of thinking of the body and associated objects as me and mine, the knower of the absolute is neither happy when pleasant things come his way, nor sad when unpleasant things come his way. Detaching his mind from external pleasures, such a knower of the absolute truth tastes the inner joy of self-realization. Then, absorbing himself in meditation on the absolute, he experiences inexhaustible bliss. Oh, we actually went through this verse last week because we had a long discussion on this point, inexhaustible bliss. O son of Kunti, the pleasures that arise from the contact of the senses with their objects are the cause of unhappiness as they are transient. The wise never delight in such pleasures. Know that one who, before leaving the body, utilizes the opportunity of this life to check the impulses of desire and anger. He is a yogi who knows true happiness. Such a yogi sees the self within and delights in the bliss of the self within. Attaining the transcendental state, he attains liberation from matter and entry into the abode of Brahman. Sinless, free from doubt, self-controlled, and dedicated to the welfare of all living beings, the seers of truth attain such liberation. So those are the verses that we just went through. Does anyone want to share any thoughts on these verses that we just heard, or any question or anything at all? So we actually we went through again some of the verses we discussed last week. And we talked a lot last week about, this, coming to this vision and this awareness, right? That we are actually utterly distinct from the plane of the senses, that the senses are just like these instruments, or like receptors, they're connecting with corresponding stimuli in the environment, right? The sense of sight is attracted to the objects of sight, the sense of sound is attracted to objects of sound, and so on and so forth, right? And the tongue and all these different urges that we experience playing through our system, they engage and they're excited by, attracted to, or repelled by different stimuli in the environment. But these things are all just playing on the surface, and they're just like a kind of a machine, you know, playing out. But the real person is within, you know, and our challenge is that we were confused and we think we're that machine. We forget we're the driver in the car and we're not the car, right? And the more that we can detach from that identification, the more we'll begin to feel, oh, there is something much deeper within, and something so much more enjoyable also. You know, coming back to this inexhaustible bliss. The soul by nature is Ananda, right? Sat, Chit, and Ananda. The soul by nature is eternal, conscious, and joyful. So we have Ananda, we have joy within us. We don't need to seek it out in a plane where we experience it in a temporary sense, and temporary, and also always has some negative reaction attached to it. There's always a price tag. There's always some fine print, you know, behind all the pleasures that we experience in this world. There's a lifespan and there's a price tag also. You know, there's an expiry date. But within, you know, and why? Because those things, they are unnatural. They're not intrinsic to our true self. And so they can only they only have meaning for limited time and in limited context. So, but the joy within, that is inherent to us. That is of our own nature. It is not something external or artificial. And I like this verse 23 very much, you know, because it's referring to this experience now. You know, the life we have is making this point that the life we have now is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to become more conscious of this higher self within and to detach ourselves. Because otherwise, in animal births, we're living with a reduced level of consciousness, and we're mostly just in the animal birth. We're mostly just acting on the basis of instinct, right? And there isn't that space in our consciousness to make more developed decisions, you know, and to have more developed awareness of that, the nature of that higher self. So this is really the significance of the human birth. You know, this is the real purpose of the human birth, that we have an opportunity to try to cultivate something higher beyond the plane of the senses. You know, otherwise, you know, what is that? Ahara, Nidra, Bhaya, Maitunam Cha, right? It's mentioned, these are the four basic functions of all living entities: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, right? So what is it that that distinguishes the human birth? You know, because if we don't consider that, then what is the use of having the human birth? We are, if we don't consider that, we are on the same level as animal species. So what is it that we have? Is that we have that ability to cultivate our higher interest. We have that ability to connect with and awaken that soul within, that higher nature within ourselves. So this life is an opportunity, and we don't want to waste that precious opportunity. And also it's mentioned in this verse 23, calm and crowed. And it's interesting, see, these two things are put next to each other. Calm is referring to lust or desire. And when we say lust, we don't just mean, you know, in the sexual sense, but in general, you know, that desire that we have for various things of this world, that attraction that we have. Calm, and then it's interesting, see, crowed means anger. Anger is put next to that. And why? And there's a reason for that. Why? Because these are kind of like the two ways in which we interface with desirable objects of this world. We want them, and then if we don't get them, or if our enjoyment of them is interrupted, we become angry, right? We become frustrated. You know, and this sequence is described earlier in, or maybe it's later, but I think it's earlier in Bhagavad Gita, that by associating with various things of this world, like what it's an interesting thing, you know. You see that whatever environment you're in, you start to desire those things. You know, what sangat sanjayate kam. According to your association, desire will arise. You know, if you're say people are talking about pizza, all of a sudden you want pizza. You know, or you're associating with people who you know have some particular interest, you know, then you also will become interested in that. Or like in the sexual sense, associating with particular persons, then desire will start to arise because of that immediate association. So sangat sanjayate kam. Desire arises through association. And then what happens, right? You have desire for something. And then if something comes along to interfere with that, to obstruct you from obtaining that, then you become angry, then you become frustrated. It's a natural sequence. So this life is an opportunity to, because, you know, we were discussing this kind of extensively last week, from what I can remember, that, you know, we all have a particular operating system, right? Which has been programmed to react in particular ways, right, to the environment. And it's all based on temporary ideas, you know, temporary conception. It's all dealing with relative temporary truth, and it's not pertaining to our true inner intrinsic nature, intrinsic identity. So we have two choices. You know, we can either let that the particular, and we all have our own unique operating system, right? Which Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he would call that the black box, right? The black box that vehicles have that keeps a record, right, of everything that's gone on. So we all have our own operating system that's been formed according to our previous experiences, right? And that operating system has its own. Okay, Marie, thanks for joining us. You know, we all have our, you know, according to our previous activities, experiences, we have our own unique operating system, which has its own particular set of prejudices and likes and dislikes. And then that system's playing out in this world and reacting in different ways with the environment according to our particular system, right? So we have two choices. We can either just let that system play out and then act in the way that it's been programmed, or we can take that step back and say, oh, okay, well, actually, that's not really who I am. This is just a particular system that's been installed. What I really want to do is wipe the drive. You know, I want to download a superior operating system. I want to install higher level software. You know, this is something very low grade, and it's not helping me, and it's not helping anybody else. So we have that choice, is to let it play out, or to step back and say, oh no, I'm not going to identify with this. This isn't who I am. I need to recalibrate. And we, you know, and that may not be possible to do that right away. You know, and sometimes we may have to just let it play out, but we'll keep that space within, that inner voice that's saying, you know, I'm not really subscribing to this anymore. I have to let the current subscription play out. But once it's over, you know, I'm done. I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for this to end. But I'm over it now. I'm not interested in this anymore. This isn't who I am. I don't identify with it anymore. And this is an awareness, and, you know, this is something that, you know, like it sounds very difficult, right? Very challenging, but this is the beauty of the practice of bhakti, the practice of devotion, that it's something that will naturally develop, right? And this is a point of distinction between the practice of devotion, bhakti, and the general yoga practices, or also you could say like, you know, Buddhism, conception of Buddhism, where there's more emphasis on renunciation, on renouncing these things or rejecting these things. This is the beauty of bhakti, the path of devotion, that the emphasis is rather on engaging in positive practices, engaging in the spirit of giving, of offering to the higher plane. And then through that, you know, and you know, in particular, the practice of kirtan, the practice of chanting, calling upon the divine through the medium of sound, the Lord's holy names. By engaging in these positive practices, then naturally that recalibration will start to happen. You know, there won't be the need to separately, you know, get rid of this, but it'll just be going on in the background. You know, like sometimes on your, I'm getting really into this analogy here. But you know, like sometimes on your computer, right, you can have so many functions going on in the background, right? You can have some program installing, right? And you don't have to like shut down the computer. You can continue with what you're doing. And in the background, there's a lot going on, right? So it's like that. This is the beauty of bhakti, that we don't have to shut down. We don't have to throw it out, but we can continue what we're doing. And in the background, that cleansing, that recalibration, it will be going on automatically, naturally. Our taste for that higher thing, that will grow more and more, and will naturally move away from that lower thing. It'll be automatic. And this is nice too. So we came to this 25. Dedicated to the welfare of all living beings. And this is also echoing a verse that we went through a couple weeks ago. Let me see where it is. It was mentioning this point that the enlightened soul is compassionate. Where is it? I'm just going back here. Which verse was it? I don't know if anyone remembers. It was a verse in this earlier in this chapter mentioning how the enlightened soul, something like they're compassionate. Or... Here it is, verse number 7 of this chapter. The clean-hearted person thus engaged in yoga controls his mind and senses, becoming filled with affection and compassion for all beings. Although fully active, he is never implicated by any action. Isn't that beautiful? You know, isn't that beautiful? And, you know, I have to say, this is one of the things I appreciate about like reading and rereading, because, you know, how many times have we been through Bhagavad Gita, but this never jumped out at me before. So, you know, as we become more enlightened, naturally, we're also becoming more sensitive and aware and empathetic and compassionate towards others, because the noise of our own ego, right, is dying down, and we can hear others. You know, we can hear where others are and what they're going through, and naturally, compassion and care and empathy will come out of that. So that idea is being repeated here again in verse 25, dedicated to the welfare of all living beings. This will be one of the natural reactions of, you know, our consciousness becoming more and more enlightened, you know, this feeling for others and care for others, desire to help others, that will naturally develop. So that's beautiful. Sinless, these are all just so nice, like, wow, I'd love to have all these qualities. Sinless, free from doubt, self-controlled, and dedicated to the welfare of all living beings. The seers of truth attain such liberation. Self-controlled. I was thinking, you know, about this recently, how, you know, like from the perspective of higher minded persons, like our condition is so embarrassing sometimes, you know, how, you know, like in particular, like the tendency I mean, you know, actually there's another book, some of you are familiar, Upadeshamrita, the Nectar of Instruction, and there, one of our teachers, the teachers in our lineage, Rupa Goswami, he talks about, in the beginning, the first verse, he speaks about the 6 principal urges that bother, that disturb the souls under the influence of the material energy. Vacho vegam, manasa krodha vegam, jiva vegam, udopashta vegam, etan veganyo, etan veganyo vishaheta dyadat, sarvam apimam pritimim sashishat. So it mentions these 6 urges of the urge of speech, like this uncontrolled urge to speak random things, anytime, any place, to anyone. The urge to speak, the urges of the belly, urge of the tongue, urge of the genitals, urge of the mind, and the urge of anger. Is anger mentioned? Vacho vega, manya krodh, anger, so urge to speak, the urges of the mind, anger, the tongue, belly, and genitals. These are the 6 urges in particular. And you know, as your awareness starts to grow, it can be embarrassing at times, you know, to reflect on how these things, they just, like, beyond our control, beyond our desire, they just like act up, you know, and whereas those who are moving, you know, further along the path, maybe they still have these urges popping up, but they can subdue them. You know, they can control them at will. They're not a slave to these things. Okay, well, we can move on to the last few verses. Does anyone want to add any thoughts or bring up a question at this point before we move on? Okay.
Can I?
Oh, yes, Narottam, please.
So, yeah, I was referring to Srila Prabhupada's version, and I think one of the verses said "science of God." Like, let's see, which one was it? I think it was verse 20. I know we did that already, but yeah, that's reminded me of the 7th canto of Bhagavatam, and I agree with what you said about, you know, Kama and Krodha, you know, being interrelated and going together. And my reflection is that, you know, since I grew up here in the US, I have a affinity towards like technical aspects. I feel like, you know, just because it was like easier subject matter to grasp for me, given, you know, the conditioning I was in and growing up. So but that's like reflective of, like, if you see when Mahaprabhu appeared on this world, you had the Renaissance in Europe, and at the same time you had, you know, Bengal, which is like had so many universities in Bengal, and like it was like the seat of learning and everything. It was a very vibrant place. So it's kind of like reflective of that, but I'm learning more to focus on Krishna now. And sometimes I feel that my work is just futile. Like, you know, I just have to do this technical work. And I have like more of a calling to like just give this up and maybe just, you know, go out on Sankirtan the whole time and try to make more devotees. But yeah, I don't, that's a longer story, but I guess these emotions we have in Krishna consciousness they're good in the way that we can give them to Krishna, you know, all these desires and everything that we have, even like, you know, Kama and Krodha, like you don't know what to do with them, give them to Krishna, he'll figure it out for us. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. So thanks.
Thank you, Narottam. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else have any shares? Okay, then we can continue. We can come to, we're just in the last 2 verses of the chapter. So I'm at 26 or 3 verses. 4 verses. Kama krodha vimuktanam yatinam yata chetasam abhito brahma nirvanam vartate viditatmanam parshan kritva bahirvayam chakshus chaivantare bhuvaho pranapano samo kritva nasabhyantara charino yatendriya mano buddhir munir moksha parayanaha vigate cha bhaya krodho yasada mukta eva saha bhoktaram yagya tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam yatva mam shantim vichati iti Shrimahabharate Shatta Sahasriyam Samhitayam Vayasikyam Bhishma Parvani Srimad Bhagavad Gita Supanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Sambade Karma Sanyas Yoga Nama Panchamo Jayaha. Okay, we'll read these translations in 26. Persons of the renounced order who have controlled their thoughts, who are free from desire and anger, and who have achieved knowledge of the nature of the soul, are liberated whether they live or die. This is what is so beautiful, about approaching the plane of spirit, that it is a matter of consciousness. So your physical location, your physical experience, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Consciousness is everything. And so in this life, in the next life, in life, after life, everywhere in between, we can always connect with that higher plane. And we will be, and whatever apparent physical situation we're going with, we will be in a liberated state. We will be beyond, we will be above, we will be in a transcendent state, beyond the physical experience we're going through. As we enter more and more into the subjective plane, right? The objective plane will become further and further in the background. The plane of objective experience will become very distant to us. And that was something that was so extraordinary in what we were able to witness in our divine master, in our Guru Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Deva Goswami Maharaj. He's someone who it was very clear to me, it was very clear to me that he was here, but he wasn't here. That he was always connected with a much higher plane. Although physically he was with us and engaging with us, of course, through his mercy and affection and trying to help us, it was also clear that he was very, very detached. And, and that's a personal experience, which, what I'm saying is not really worth very much, but unless you've had that experience yourself, then it's difficult to convey the truth of that. But according to my subjective vision and subjective experience, it was clear to me that he was not here, that he was living in a higher plane and interacting with the higher plane. And his reference point was never here. His reference point was always there. That although present here, he was in a liberated condition. To me, that was something very, very evident. And sometimes, his moods would change. Sometimes he would engage in more of an immediate way. He could be just like one of the group. He could be like that. He could be very intimate. He could be very funny and like a member of your family at times. And then there were other times where he was very, very distant, and it was clear he was absorbed in much higher plane. He was very fully detached from the events of this world, and things like time, place, circumstance, they were very far from his thinking. You know, that he was living in a plane of eternity, and everything he did was on the basis of eternal principles. It was made from the consideration of eternal principles. You know, that was my vision of him, what I could perceive of him. So, you know, just to say that, you know, we've had that experience. Such things are possible, you know, to be here in this world, but liberated from this world at the same time. You know, just as this is, you know, I mean, it's not such a, you know, a significant example, but one small example that comes to mind, you know, from a scientific viewpoint, you know, that there was one occasion at one of our group, someone who was acting as one of our group's nurses at one time told me this, and it was in his last years, he was showing ill health, and somebody came, and I don't know the details, or I don't remember them, but something happened that upset him very much, and he was shouting, and he was showing a lot of anger, and this one person who was acting as his nurse, she was actually a professional nurse, she was concerned, oh, this is bad for his blood pressure. And so she came afterwards, right after the incident, and she checked his blood pressure levels, and she said it was exactly the same. It was exactly the same, no different, you know. And anyone else, it would have like spiked very high, but he was showing apparently high emotion, but he was maintaining inner equilibrium. You know, and whatever he was showing, it was actually for the purpose of instruction, you know, in a spirit of service, and ultimately in a spirit of affection, you know. But internally, he, you know, there was no, he wasn't disturbed in his equilibrium, his mood of peace. You know? Okay, we'll continue. Let's see if we can finish the chapter. Expelling from the mind all the external sense objects of sounds, touch, form, taste, and smell, centering the concentration and stabilizing the incoming and outgoing breath, subjugating the senses, mind, and intelligence, dedicating himself to liberation, his desire, fear, and anger gone, such a sage is ever liberated. And now we've come to this last verse, which was particularly liked by Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, and some of you may have heard him speaking about it. He would call this the peace formula, Swami Maharaj Prabhupada. So I'll read this here. This is Krishna speaking. I am the enjoyer and objective of the sacrifices performed by persons of action, and of the austerities performed by persons of knowledge. I am Narayan, the indwelling monitor of all planes of life, the worshipable Supreme Personality who awards liberation. I am Krishna, the well-wisher of all, and the dear friend of the devotees. One who knows me thus attains the bliss of knowing his own original divine identity. So, you know, Sanskrit, it is a very broad language, and there are different ways in which these verses can be translated and appreciated. And so Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, he gave a particular explanation of this verse, which is very wonderful. And as I said, he would refer to it as the peace formula, because the shantam, richati, is meant. Shanti is peace, right? And everyone, I think, knows that word more or less. So this is how Swami Maharaj would frame this, you know, the points that are mentioned here, that, you know, how it is describing how one can achieve peace. You know? And if one can accept these three principles, which are mentioned here. One, Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam. Krishna is saying that I am the enjoyer of all. Yagya means sacrifice, tap means austerity. So of all the austerities and sacrifices, endeavors that are made in this world, Krishna is saying, I am the real recipient. I am the true enjoyer of that. Everything ultimately is for my purpose, right? So this is the first principle, to accept. And so what is implied there? That we're not the enjoyer. Sorry. What you mean the whole universe doesn't exist for me? I'm not the center of the world, because like consciously or unconsciously, we all believe that to some extent or another, that the whole world is supposed to cooperate to support our interest, right? And if the whole environment isn't bowing down to us and our interest, we become upset. It's a funny thing. And we do it like unconsciously. We become upset if everything doesn't happen exactly as we want it to happen. And we also become threatened by people who do not acknowledge our supremacy. We become threatened by people who do not acknowledge that our interest is more important than everyone else's. We have our own particular agenda, and we expect everyone to support that. And if they don't, then we think of them as unfriendly to us, right? It is a funny thing. So here we're being told this is like the medicine for that, accepting there's a higher interest, there's a universal interest, there is a God interest, and God's interest is synonymous with the collective interest. This is the real fundamental purpose and flow. Normally we are trying to go upstream, right? We're going against the current, we're resisting. We are imposing our limited and secondary ideals and interests and conceptions upon the environment. But there's actually a fundamental and original flow that's already moving. Let's go with the current. Let's go downstream. Let's move with the current. Let's tap into that. Let's connect with that and move in harmony with that. Let us dance in consonance with that beautiful wave, not resist it or impose something else on top of it. So Krishna is asserting that here, I'm really the purpose behind everything. I am really the true enjoyer of everything. So try to dedicate everything to me, the highest interest, the original interest. And if we can accept that, we will become free of so much frustration. It's okay if everything doesn't happen in my favor. That wasn't the whole point anyway. There's something higher at work here. Let me tune into that. Let me offer everything to that. Then what is the second point mentioned here? Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. The word loka has a double meaning, actually. Loka means people, and it also means like a plane, can mean a planet, a country, a plane. So Maheshwar means Maha Ishwar, means like supreme master, supreme lord. So he's saying, I am the supreme lord of everyone and everything. I am the controller. I am in control. I am managing. I am taking care of everyone and everything. And then what is the third point? Very important. So what are the implications of this? Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. There is a plan, there is a purpose, there is rhyme.